How you doing, guys? We're taking another look at severe weather for later this afternoon into this evening for a handful of areas across the United States. In fact, what we're watching right now is basically everywhere from about sections of Iowa all the way back into parts of Kansas, Oklahoma, and all the way back a little bit along the dry line here in parts of Oklahoma as well. But for the most part, really parts of Iowa, Missouri, and Kansas come later this afternoon, which doesn't mean we don't have anything right now. You know, as we kind of zoom on in, we do still have some convection left over from yesterday in parts of Minnesota and Wisconsin, even into Illinois. You know, as we kind of zoom across here, there are a couple of cells in here, mainly these guys right there, and then these guys back here, which continue to cruise on off to the east, that do have some severe warned areas with them. In fact, as we zoom on in, you can see we do have a severe thunderstorm watch and warning, I should say, in effect with these cells here, and then these cells down here. So as we continue to kind of look at things this morning, we do have convection out there right now, which doesn't mean that the atmosphere will be spent come later this afternoon, though, as we are looking at, well, surface observations showing plenty of available moisture in parts of Kansas, Missouri, and into Iowa. You know, as we kind of zoom on out and zoom back on in, I mean, we've got dew points out there in the low 50s and upper 40s across parts of Iowa, even with your temperatures just hanging out in the 50s. Very sticky morning out there. So as you're getting ready and headed into the afternoon, well, get ready for a little humidity and maybe a little bit of severe weather. But the interesting thing is, this isn't exactly your atypical severe weather setup across parts of the Midwest. You know, we've got our little Vort lobe way back here as we look at 500 millibar heights. You know, another thing to watch, by the way, this 546 line, and then back in behind it the 540 line, which is right there or so. Over the next couple of days, instead of severe weather, we could be talking about snow. But anyway, not really your atypical setup. You know, as you look at 200 millibars or so, you know, you don't really have a lot of spreading out there ahead of this next system. As we take it on into the vertical velocity, it's 700 millibars or so. By the way, we're looking at the wrap for today. The 1Z, well, I should say the 12Z wrap, we're looking at 1Z, so about sunset or so, 6, 7, 8, 9 o'clock. We're kind of in that ballpark is what we're looking at right now. So, about sunset. And you notice we do have some vertical velocity out there, you know, in the areas that we are concerned about. You know, I can kind of switch it over. I'll leave that circle there. We can flip it over and we'll look at CAPE now. Not a lot of instability in the atmosphere for today. We're talking about CAPE values between about 700, 800, upwards of 1,500 to maybe 2,000 if we can really get things going, especially in parts of southwestern Iowa and parts of northeastern Kansas come later this afternoon. That's where you're going to have the most CAPE. But again, we're not looking at a whole lot. You know, this isn't late May where we've got CAPE values hanging out in between 2,500 and 4,000 to 5,000 in parts of Oklahoma. But for today, you still got to watch it, because as we take it over to the EHI, we do have values up over about 3 to 4 or so. Again, we're leaving that area circled because that's the area that we're watching. And the lifted index, that's how much, again, how much oomph we have in the atmosphere, what we watch for how fast a parcel of air, as we call it, can get lifted back up into the atmosphere. And usually for severe weather, you look for anything above about a -4, I should say below a -4. -4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You know, for today, we'll be anywhere between about a -4 and a -6 and upwards of about a -7 and -8. So again, we're watching this area very closely. Notice that there is, I'm going to clear this out, there is kind of a back edge to this guy right in there. That would be the dry line as it continues to push off to the east for today, also mixing with a cold front, which we'll have back off to the north. But again, I'm going to kind of circle this area again. That's the area that we're concerned about. And we'll take it back over to helicity. Again, this is how much spin that we have in the atmosphere with some of these updrafts. How much are they twisting around? And oftentimes we talk about helicity when we're talking about hail and tornadoes. And usually you want values, as you can see here, up over 300, which we'll have in a couple of different areas, but the 12Z wrap isn't being quite as aggressive with some of our helicity readings or suggestions into the afternoon. And again, you can see where the dry line sets up for today. Again, I'll circle this back up again, and we'll take it over to composite reflectivity. Basically, what we're looking at is the suggested radar at 1Z or so. Notice not much out there from twisterdata.com showing the wrap here. Interesting. I do think we'll see a couple of supercells back in here kind of fire and maybe drift on off to the east and northeast, as well as a line of cells in parts of Iowa for later this afternoon. Clear that out. We'll circle it back up again to give you guys a better idea. Now, we'll take it over to temperatures, basically wind, temperature, and we're also looking at mean sea level on here. And you circle the same area, and we're going to have enough heat later this afternoon, but notice you can see where that cold front is, back off to the north. You might not be able to make that out very well using red on red. But now, do something that I haven't done quite yet, but the guys at twisterdata.com made a recommendation. Let's take a look at the skew T. And I mentioned the dry line. This is what the dry line looks like on a skew T. We've got your temperature here, we've got your dew point here. Notice how dry it is and how you read these guys, and you'll basically take from wherever ground level you're at, and I took this guy off to the north and east of Amarillo, so you're sitting at about 2,500 feet or so. And so we'll take it from about 980 millibars just to be safe. You drop that down, you're sitting at about 31, 32, 33 degrees C. And your dew point is way down here, sitting at below zero come later this afternoon. It's very dry air on the back side of the dry line, which is what you expect. West side of the dry line, you're dry, you're clear, you got nothing but sunshine and wind. And when you're on the other side of the dry line, well, you've got a little bit of moisture, and you're going to have that for today. In fact, here's the skew T from just north of Wichita on the other side of, well, we'll go ahead and call it just about Emporia, Kansas or so. Notice one thing we always watch is how this line, this is that temperature line again, drifts back off, I guess back off to the left. Same goes with our dew point line here. Notice how this kind of wiggles on the way up. I'll get to what that wiggling means here in a couple of seconds. But oftentimes when you watch that line drift back, that means that you're getting cooler with height, which is a good thing. You want cold air so you can lift that warm air into that cold air, cool, condense, get some good old-fashioned rain, or what we're looking for today, severe weather. Now let's take a look at what it looks like in Iowa. Notice how the temperature line here and the dew point line very close together. It means you're saturating that air. Also notice on here, they are right on top of each other at about, we'll call it 750 to about 800 millibars or so. That's your boundary layer. What we're watching there is that's where you're going to condense that air. You'll end up with low cloud decks, which is what you need to produce tornadoes. Now, tornado threat for today is relatively low. I say relatively because there's about a 2 to 5% chance you do catch a tornado, but you're not looking at a situation where you've got 10, 15, or 20% chance and you're looking at opportunities for EF2 or graders. But it is interesting to see this. The other thing you'll notice on here is look how far, look how dramatic that dew point drops back off to the left here. This shows you that you've got different heights in the atmosphere, and again, ground level down here, we're looking up into the atmosphere. You've got different levels here with different saturations, so when you've got a lot of moisture down here and not much here, that'll help build those clouds. You're not capped either. Your temperature line is cool all the way up, and this shows that you've got different air masses at different levels of the atmosphere, which is what a lot of people look for when you're talking about severe weather. So now let's take a look. We're going to take a look at the SREF real quick, and notice how the RAP didn't really say that we were going to see a whole lot of moisture out there, but our good old SREF here is not agreeing at all. Plenty of rain across that same circled area. I can go back and show this here, but it looks like, let's see here, let's find our twister data. See, notice how this same area, not much. As we clear things out and take a look at the SREF, there's a difference there. The SREF going with plenty of moisture. In fact, as we take a look at the Texas Tech Wharf, one thing I also wanted to point out, this is basically just looking at Kansas, but I was mentioning those supercells, and I think the Texas Tech Wharf here handles this really well. Notice we've got one here firing up, drifting across. We've got another guy or two firing up back off to the north and east, just kind of drifting across before turning linear. And these will group up with those cells back off to the north and east as well. Another thing to note is if you're watching this in parts of Oklahoma and North Texas, how about a little bit of inclement weather for you as well as we head into the overnight hours. So again, that's basically a look at what we're looking at down here for severe weather as we head into the afternoon.